Welcome back to the Truth Over Comfort show. On our previous video, we discussed Afghan Ghani, who's basically a Western-made Frankenstein out of their lab. He was born in Afghanistan, but he went to the US, to Berkeley, if I'm not incorrect, to study at university. He professed at Columbia and Johns Hopkins before joining the World Bank. He set up a foundation with a fellow old World Bank employee called Institute of State Effectiveness, funded by Western governments and foundations. He did a TED talk in 2005 on fixing failed states, and even wrote a book with the person who set the institute up about fixing failed states. And obviously, he then did become president in 2014 to fix this so-called failed state. Well, again, it's been bombed for years, which may be part of the reason it's not completely stable. But when they say fixing a failed state, I mean they mean bringing it to the Western system. He also sat on the Atlantic Council board, and had a good relationship with them, and he worked on that board alongside Rupert Murdoch, Zbigniew Brzezinski, CEOs, and the Atlantic Council is funded by arms corporations, banks, oil, NATO, and all that good fun. He even, did a conference speech to some European thing, saying how great it was that NATO's first mission outside of Europe was in his home country in Afghanistan, bringing democracy and all that good stuff. And he said Europe needs more NATO, and he just loves the fact that they occupy his country, bombing it and making people miserable against their will. And there's in the Atlantic Council, because he carries on relationship all the way through presidency and the Atlantic Council host stuff. And there's an IMF thing saying I was open. Ghani says Afghanistan's open for business, and in the Atlantic Council article it says about exploiting their resources and making it a welcome place to foreign investors, which is making their state. It's all crazy. I don't know how you can write a book on fixing failed states and become the president. What the chances? But anyway, we aren't talking about that today. And credit to Ben Norton, who I read that article and used the links from it. I didn't, wasn't just reading from the article, but I took all the information from it. I recommend. He did a video on it as well. He wrote in 2021 when he was at the Grey Zone. But today we are talking about Afghanistan, specifically airstrikes, and a couple examples, and just how prominent these were from start to finish. And of course, the cherry on top of the end when they left, another beautiful airstrike that destroyed the lives of people, killed children and civilians because they wanted to get their ISIS target. But when there's also the night raids that killed people, accidentally shooting the wrong person, and rogue units and soldiers just straight up murdering people. But the thing with airstrikes is there's always going to be civilian casualties most of the time, because you're dropping it from such a high distance. They're not that precise. You can get faulty intelligence. Let's face it, if you're trying to hit a target, you're going to get a few people. To them, that's collateral damage. If there's a taxi or a car, they're in, a target's in a car, just one of them, and it's a busy, there's cars around it, they will still bomb it. And, even if it's a taxi, they would bomb it, and they are willing to kill innocent people for the greater good, even though all that does is help recruitment for, the state reason they're there to fight Al Qaeda. It's just a breeding ground for radicalizing people who maybe weren't that radical until you killed their family and their friends, and they're pretty pissed, and it changes your mental state, and they're devastated. But also the thing with airstrikes is it not only kills civilians, it destroys the buildings, destroys people's houses, their neighbors, their villages in some cases, and it just destroys the environment. These are farming cultures who are growing things a lot, obviously opium during this time. But you bomb an area and you ain't growing anything there for years. It's probably poisonous. Again, the shrapnel that goes in people, poisonous. You know, you don't really hear environmentalists actually discussing how much, you know, dropping bombs on countries probably isn't really good for the ground, roots, the soil, and I don't think you could probably ever grow something there again, especially with some of the bombs they use. But yeah, we're going to be talking about some of the things going on. I have a few here on my website. I'll probably do a video on it at some point to actually explain stuff on my website. I got 79 minutes or 68 minutes of just quotes from Afghanistan 2001 to now. I actually had to split into three because it was just wax me out. I had to split into three: the Afghan-Soviet War, and then in between in the 90s, and some of the stuff about the pipeline talks with Clinton and Taliban. But yeah, I actually had to make three because it was so long. But that's for another day. The moral of the story today is from start to finish, airstrikes just killed innocent people. They hit weddings. They hit hospitals. All this stuff with Russia and Ukraine as if it's never happened before. And whether the claims are true, I'm sure there's a lot of falsities there. There's so much propaganda around this proxy war. Whether they're true or not doesn't matter. The US has done it, and this is only focused on airstrikes in Afghanistan, let alone Libya, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan, and then even before, from World War II onwards, Korea, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Chile, other places in South America, Grenada, the invasion of Panama by George H.W. Bush, the Gulf War, the sanctions, Nicaragua, all the COVID stuff there, Afghanistan. These are, all the stuff that's happened. America's been an empire since World War II, at least. Picked up the baton from Britain, our junior partner with Australia and Canada, who are part of these war crimes as well in Afghanistan. The SAS units we can discuss another time. But again, this is 2001, 30th of October. The war's just started, and Human Rights Watch are already reporting civilian deaths due to US bombing. Just remarkable, really. And there was 2 wedding bombings, maybe 3, actually, in Afghanistan. This is from a UN OCH, United Nations Office for the Coordination Humanitarian Affairs, and this is 2008. 40 Afghan civilians killed as US-led airstrikes hits wedding party. So, the US has been there and done it, ticked it off the bucket list. They've done weddings, they've done hospitals, they've probably done everything they can. So even if Russia has done it, America has too. Whether Russia's done it before, maybe this is what superpowers do. They can get away with murder and mass murder. But anyway, at least 40 Afghan civilians have been killed and 28 more injured as an airstrike of the US-led coalition forces hits a wedding gathering in southern Afghanistan's Kandahar province. Officials and local villagers said. It's where we get caught up in this, including me in my head. I hear say it was 2 killed and 60 wounded or injured. Oh, only 2 were killed. You got to remember, wounded and injured can mean amputee. How much life does he have after that he can enjoy? Does he wish he was part of the ones who was killed? Literally, their balls being blown off. And you think I'm joking? Like, you can look up US veterans balls blown up, like gone after. No more kids. No, blown up. So even if you're part, that just a statistic of 50 wounded, well, those wounds could be basically you probably want to die, really, don't you? If you're amputated, you could be your legs and your arms, scars all over your body, whatever else it may be, against shrapnel in you. It's not just like a bullet. They might be taking it like this. It's gone everywhere. It's probably poison, their bloodstream. They might get all sorts of illnesses or diseases when they're older. I'm not an expert on it, but I'm sure no one's gonna debate that shrapnel in your body spread out is exactly your 5 a day. The US-led troops called in gunship helicopters Monday afternoon to retaliate on militants who earlier that day attacked them. However, the air bombing hit a wedding party being held near the hilly area where the Taliban insurgents firing came from, according to locals. There's got to be a point where you're being shot at your country is the biggest defense contractors in the world with the, apparently best military in the world, best hardware. Your plane can take a few rifle bullets. If they have anti-aircraft stuff, maybe we're going to get to another example of this where, there's got to be an option to fly off. You don't mean you're a coward. You just don't want to bomb a certain area to try and hit a few targets. You might not have the right intelligence on the ground, and you end up taking out a wedding, and then everyone hates you. Do you want to get the hearts and minds of people? Well, when you drop a bomb, you literally do get the hearts and minds of people when it blows out their body. But I'm not sure that's exactly what the US is going for. So maybe calm down on those airstrikes and just, fly off at like however fast they go, hundreds of miles per hour. Those bullets trying to aim, reassess situation, get some intelligence on the ground. If you really need to bomb. But you know, I don't know if this was just an impulsive decision. I'm not saying that, but they've gone back there because they've been shot at. And if you're bombing a wedding, then your intelligence isn't good enough, or your aim isn't good enough, or whatever it may be. You hit a wedding, like there's not much argument for that. And if you're like, oh, it's in a Taliban area, well, the Taliban's are locals and they're not actually the occupier, and they're, people shouldn't have to like move house because the Taliban's there, but they probably do move after the US bomb their whole village. I'm sure that the Taliban obviously do a lot of atrocities. I'm not saying they like them, but they're not actually the occupier. They're just in that village. Maybe some of them used to live there. Maybe it is their stronghold, but they're not technically the occupier at the end of the day. Condemning the incident, Afghan President Hamid Karzai, their puppet president and government, is condemning this, and many of the articles are them not actually happy. Was saddened by the killing of 40 civilians and injuring 28 others in a coalition airstrike. A statement from his house said, President Karzai has stressed repeatedly in the past that civilian casualties should be avoided, but the coalition forces usually carry out bombing without planning. A report at the scene Wednesday afternoon saw many locals there still searching for the debris for their relatives' dead bodies. There is an investigation started, and the bloodiest one in years was on August 22nd, when a US airstrike in Shindan district of Western Herbert province, according to UN and Afghan government probe, claimed over 90 civilian lives, which prompted the Afghan cabinet to pass a historic resolution asking for a re-regulation of foreign troops presence in post-Taliban nation. So this is a different airstrike. This is the thing, it happens over and over again. It's not like one time where like the people are all on their side and they're like, oh, they're our saviors. They're here for us. Oh, hear about the news, I know, but it was for the greater good. They're gonna be a few casualties. It's just like every month, every year, just civilian casualties after civilian casualties, bombing a wedding. It's maybe one of their happiest days in their lives, unless it's a forced marriage, maybe not. But it was a celebration, and it's turned into a funeral. It's almost the film, 4 weddings and a funeral. Basically, what it is here. So this is, I think, as a carry on from this. A joint Afghan is a few days later. This is in 2008. Same as that. A joint Afghan and US military investigation has concluded an airstrike last week killed 37 civilians and wounded 35 more after Taliban militants. I'm still trying to work out if this is the same attack. I think it is, because 40 civilian casualties have been killed, 28 more injured, and it's 3 days before this. So I think it is. And Hamid Karzai says the problem with their main backer, the United States, is these civilian casualties, which was the biggest source of tension. A string of mistaken US airstrikes this year have killed at least 150 Afghan civilians. Not really great, is it? Just innocent lives being killed in this war. And if you're saying you're there because we was attacked and we're here to get basically 400 to 500 Al-Qaeda operatives, members, but then you turn it into a full-scale war and occupation against the Taliban as well, it becomes a recruiting ground because you keep killing these people, and it radicalizes people when their family have been killed. As I said earlier, it led to the growth of ISIS. Al-Qaeda only got bigger, with the war in Syria and here, and it's just a non-stop recruitment. They don't even need marketing, the Taliban. A US drops a drone or airstrike, kills a bunch of civilians, and that's it. People would join. People join the insurgency because they're sick of it. Because to them, the Taliban is the locals. You know that many veterans and people talk about how in the day they're farmers and at night they're insurgents defending their village. So this is one of the wedding. So this was in July. So I want to say this is different. There was two. I'll get to the other in a second because I think that's the one we just read. The Haskamena wedding airstrike was an attack by the US forces in July 2008. So this is a few months apart, in which 47 Afghans were killed. The group was escorting a bride to a wedding ceremony in the groom's village. The US denied it, but an investigation by the Afghan government disagreed and determined 47 civilians, including the bride, had been killed. So you got to remember, this isn't the Taliban saying this. This isn't the enemy going, the US are killing this. This is their puppet government who are corrupt, actually coming out and doing their own investigation when the US denies it, saying, no, they do not look good for them. I mean, unless it's a face-saving thing. But if you're the Afghan government, who everyone knows the US backs you, all their money is holding you up. You are in power because of them. And you're coming out and saying, no, we're going to do an investigation. You did kill 47 civilians, including the bride. Unless it's a face-saving thing. I don't know. But it would seem strange to do. Let's go to the other wedding. This one. So this is the one we just read. November 2008. The Wetch Baji wedding party airstrike refers to the 37 Afghan civilians and injuring about 27 others. On the 5th of November 2008, Afghan President Hamid Karzai responded by demanding the newly elected US President Barack Obama to end civilian deaths, saying, our demand is there be no civilian casualties in Afghanistan. We cannot win the fight against terrorism with airstrikes. This is my first demand of my new president. He actually made, a good point. The fight against terrorism with airstrikes doesn't work. Oh, I'm up here. Because it means you're going to end up with recruitment grants. 9 Afghan boys collecting firewood killed by NATO helicopters. So this is pretty sad because children, and the mother is going to be devastated for one, but she was actually the one who told him to go out and get the firewood because it's cold, and they go out and they don't come back because, and it's not even, it has to be like a sinister thing like the US is just purposely killing civilians because it's just trying to piss everyone off and cause chaos. This is what happens in a war. There's going to be mistakes. And when you're doing massive airstrikes, there's going to be death. And at some point, you just cut your losses and leave. And the heart of my things is just nonsense. It's just bollocks. Like, you're occupying a country. It's not like you have this clean, squeaky reputation where you've gone in to occupy countries in war to be the policeman of the world and you've actually helped them. You've got Vietnam stained on you. They've watched the Gulf War and you've sanctioned Iraq for 10 years and bombing after administration. Laos bombed more times than World War II by the US. For what? Because they didn't want them to go communist. For the people. It's just nonsense. So Afghanistan, Kabul, capital of New York Times. 9 boys collecting firewood to heat their homes in eastern Afghanistan mountains were killed by NATO helicopter gun. This is an airstrike, to be fair, who mistook them for insurgents. There's a good example of air power mistakes. That's what it's more about. On a statement by NATO, they apologized because they mistook them for insurgents. The boys were 9 to 15 years old and only one survived. This is him speaking now. His mother had told him to go out with the other boys to collect firewood because the weather is very cold now. We almost done collecting the wood when suddenly we saw the helicopters come. There were 2 of them. The helicopters hovered over us, scanned us, and we saw a green flashlight from the helicopters. They then flew back high up, and in the second round, they hovered over us and started shooting. They fired a rocket which landed on a tree. The tree branches fell over me and shrapnel hit my right hand. The tree basically signed it. General Petraeus says sorry. It was the 3rd instance in 2 weeks in which the Afghan government had accused NATO of killing civilians. NATO disputes one of them, but 2 of them they've admitted to being accidents. Imagine, say the third one is wrong. 2 weeks in a span of a 20-year war. Imagine how many times that happened. This is just 2 weeks. Day in the life of an Afghan. You look in the sky. It was like there was a thing up from some Pakistani said they liked it when it was cloudy and maybe even rainy because they could go outside because there was no drones in the sky. But when it was a nice blue sky, when you want to be out there enjoying it, it was the scariest thing on earth because the drones are out because they can see you. Imagine just being an Afghan boy. You just want to go out and enjoy yourself, and you see these black helicopters, these planes, and you think, "Am I next? Am I next? Am I going to be the next one to kill all the mothers and dads? Are my children? You don't want them to go out, but then you're in the house. You could still get bombed, but you might be mistaken for insurgents. They're 9 to 15. It's clearly the technology's that not that precise because they can't see with whatever they're using that he's like that big because he's 9. But it doesn't matter because he's that big because you're that high up. This is just sort of a carry on. As soon as we heard about the attacks on this is the local people on the village children. Sorry. As soon as we heard about the attack on the village's children, all the village men rushed the mountains to find out what really happened. Finally, we found the dead bodies. Some of these were really badly chopped up by the rockets, he said. The head of a child was missing, others were missing limbs. We tried to find the body pieces and put them together. As it was getting late, we brought down the bodies in a rope bed. We buried them in the village cemetery. The children were all from poor families, otherwise no one would send their sons up the mountains despite the known threats from both insurgents and the Americans. So there's the day in the life of a villager. They come together because that's sort of their culture, and they have to bury someone else's child and then maybe think my one's next. Know what you think about the war and the justifications. Stuff like this happens, and there's a point where, as a commander, I don't care if they're constantly looking. We need to win the war. We have to do these airstrikes. Where's your empathy? Where is your civility? It doesn't exist. You have to be like a sociopathic. Feel like it's a game. It's all a game to these people. That it's all just a. They're fighting the Taliban here. It's against the government. It's not even they're not even the ones who attacked them, and they know that, and they're still willing to see just time after time this happened, and children as well. Afghanistan, NATO airstrike kills civilians in Helmand. Western forces have accidentally killed a number of civilians in an air attack in the Afghan province of Helmand. The governor's office there said, again, trying to get Taliban, trying to get, whoever, Al Qaeda, and it ends up in death. 7 men, women, and children were killed in the attack. 9 children died in another NATO airstrike in eastern Kunar province earlier this month. That's the New York Times article they was just talking about. So just how many times this could happen? Over and over and over. At some point, you've got to be like, it's enough. It's been 10 years since the war this time, or 11, 12. Not making much progress. And we're just destroying their society. But they're in it for the long haul. Here's just some more. Afghanistan. NATO airstrike kills 7 policemen. Years later, a flattened Afghan village reflects on US bombardment. It took £50,000 of American explosives to level Niaz Mohammad's village. The village had become a Taliban stronghold, a virtual factory for bombs that killed and maimed American soldiers. They approved, at the height of the US offensive in late 2010, commanders chose what they considered their best option. They approved an airstrike that flattened all the buildings in the town and more than 40, including Mohammed's home. Though no civilians were killed, crazily, the bombardment quickly became one of the most controversial attacks of the war in Afghanistan. 3 years later, the village is a sandy ruin, symbolizing the gains and losses of America's longest war. A few of them have trickled back. So this is annoying me. So, look, it's good no one died. But imagine sitting there and saying, so the Taliban has this stronghold in this village, and our only option is we're just gonna just blow up the whole village. And we're like, again, it's a game. We need to take out these people, and the collateral damage is not only maybe killing people, because I'm sure they didn't think they was going to kill no one unless they evacuated it, but then the Taliban know they're coming. They was willing to destroy their whole village. And the thing is, again, with an airstrike, it's not just killing you, killing people around you, destroying the building. It's destroying every bit, every memory in there, every possession is incinerated. You know, their first step. Well, I don't know. As I'm thinking of our culture, their first step. That's where they did it in there, and these prized possessions from passed down from generations of this village, because they are obviously cultural people who don't really probably move too far from where they live, and that's just all gone. And some generals just like, well, there's a lot of Taliban there, and we can't go on the ground and try and win a long battle. We've got better, military grade equipment. We're just gonna level out this whole village, and the Taliban will have to go. And so I was like, well, the Taliban have to go. So will the people. But like, well, that's just the cost of the war. But that's not an Afghan general thing. That's a US who thousands of miles away has nothing to do with it. Imagine if someone just bombed the whole village in your town and said, well, the enemy had a stronghold, but the enemy to you is thousands of miles away. It makes no sense. And there's like, let's just cut our losses. We're just gonna, destroy every memory that people have. And with a house, the guy comes back, his house has been blown up. It's gone. There's no remaking it. The bricks are all over the place. His family are dead. His everything and memories of it are dead. And that's it. And then he just gets well, we thought this guy was like near or there. I'm sorry. We're really sorry. We're so sorry. Yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah. Apologies. Why don't you say so? Yeah. No hard feelings. Forgive me and all. No, not gonna happen. Reports: US anti-insurgent airstrikes kill Afghan civilians. So we're gonna wrap it up soon, don't worry. US justifies Afghan wedding bombing. It was someone shooting at him. He could have, just flown off, like I said, but no, bombs them. I don't know. This is 2002, and Google only came up with 2 wedding bombings, or Wikipedia, sorry. So I'm not sure what's going on here. Again, this is me using the custom tools, just do dates. And this, again, just for Afghanistan, just article after article. US assault, children found dead, 34 civilians, 120 dies, US bombs village, 37 dead. NATO airstrike kills civilians, 12 Afghan civilians dead, 30 Afghan civilians killed in airstrike, family of 14 died in airstrike, on and on and on. This is again the UN. 40% of all civilian casualties from airstrikes in Afghanistan, almost 1,600 in the last only 5 years, were children. 3,000, so hundreds of children been killed and hundreds more injured by US and Afghanistan airstrikes in the past 5 years. UN data analyzed by OAV can reveal. Between 2016 and 2020, there have been 3,977 total civilian casualties from only airstrikes. So 2,122 civilians killed, 1,855 civilians injured, 1,598 total civilian casualties from airstrikes, 785 were children, and 813 children are injured. 40% of all airstrike casualties were children. Just imagine that. Almost half of airstrike casualties are children. This is only over 5 years, but that's still a crazy stat. Think about all the people who lost their children in those years, all for the greater good. They're there for you. Remember, we've invaded we're your savior, the second coming. Save you from what? They're thinking the Taliban are in the fight against you, and they're doing atrocities against you. You go, yeah, it's not great, but it's definitely better. How can you be the savior when you're dropping bombs on our villages, destroying it, all for your political reasons and military gains? They're your military. They're not ours. They are our children, which you're taking away from us in 40% of airstrikes. So this is from 2016. I'm gonna just do a couple videos and then I'm gonna end it. Pentagon: US bombing of Afghanistan hospital not a war crime. Interesting. But I'm sure if Russia did it, war crime. And it's always the Pentagon investigating himself, saying, "You don't think we're in trouble." I'm gonna play this for you.
From North Korea, we turn to Afghanistan now. CNN has learned that several members of the U.S. military will be disciplined tomorrow for their role in an October airstrike that hit a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Kunduz, Afghanistan. More than 40 people, including 3 children, were killed. Let's get right to CNN's Barbara Starr. She's live at the Pentagon. Barbara, the Pentagon has said this was an accident, but Afghans suspect otherwise.
Well, this is why the group that runs the hospital, Doctors Without Borders, continues, since it happened in October, to ask for an independent investigation. The Pentagon has never agreed to that. What we will hear tomorrow morning here at the Pentagon is 16 members of the U.S. military facing discipline. They are not going to face, we are told, criminal charges, but things like letters of reprimand, career-ending action, if you will. We are also led to believe that a top special operations commander involved in the attack will also face discipline. Actually, several of them have already been removed from their job. The attack in October was absolutely horrifying. 42 civilians killed. And the initial investigation showed the military was clearly at fault. A hospital is on a no-strike list at all times. Apparently, the crews involved, the people involved, thought they were striking an insurgent site, but there was human error, there was technical error, there were procedural errors, all of that leading the military to strike the hospital in an assault, an air assault that lasted nearly half an hour. Perhaps one of the most horrifying details about this, the military had been told very clearly where the hospital was, and even during the air assault, there were phone calls made by personnel on the ground to the military saying, we are here, we are civilians, this is a hospital, back off. That never happened. All of these errors, not criminal charges, the Pentagon says, because there was no criminal intent, but horrifying, a horrifying series of mistakes. Jake?
Barbara Starr, live for us at the Pentagon. Thank you so much.
It's good they obviously reported it in that way. It's nice to see them doing some decent work here and there. And as you said, she said they was warned, they was called, they went ahead and did it anyway and bombed the hospital and the people. Imagine, you're in a job and you murder someone, you bomb a hospital, which you're not allowed to bomb, and you don't go to prison. You just get fired or maybe fired. They might not have even been fired. They like to keep these things quiet. I don't know. But at the end of the day, you can be like, oh, the individual people who pulled the trigger get fired. But it's a policy for these airstrikes, and there is risk that the person doing it, getting his orders to be able to do this sort of stuff, gets the wrong person. There's a systematic problem that needs to be changed. These airstrikes, it's just they're gonna go wrong, and it is part of warfare, and it is, with the drones, the whole idea is so the Americans get no casualties, so the people don't get annoyed. But don't worry about the civilian casualties in the other countries. Yeah, it's obviously part of warfare. It's going to happen, and it is effective. It kills plenty of people. If you are a savage military commander, and you're not getting sleepless nights over these civilian casualties, it is effective, and it's not going to go away. But to me, obviously you don't do the war in the first place. You don't occupy, and you won't get these. But that's not realistic. We're going to go to one more, and it is, of course, the airstrike that start to finish, and it's the cherry on the icing. Just one more airstrike for the boys. We're getting out of Afghanistan finally after 20 years. People are probably cheering. I don't know, a lot of them are trying to get away on the plane because of the Taliban, but I'm sure a lot of people are cheering. Finally, they're gone. Finally, they're gone. The Taliban are going, but at least the advanced military hardware, they're just wrecking our lives, our families, our livelihoods, our land, everything is finally gone. They just drop one more because they need to get this guy. They need to get that ISIS guy. And even though it's their own problem that they started in the first place, because invading Iraq, firing all Saddam Hussein's staff, putting all these people in prison, and then, all funding the insurgency in Syria, and it all boils over, and ISIS pops up, and they're working, in Iraq with the ex-officials of Saddam Hussein who got fired as soon as they invaded. So the problem that they started, more terrorists now than at the time of 9/11, that small group of Al Qaeda, because of these wars, the recruiting grounds. And then they got to bomb this ISIS guy before they leave Afghanistan. Just, one more bomb for Lockheed Martin or Raytheon, who it is. We got it in stock, just one more for the boys. And it's absolutely disgusting because they end up killing civilians, children. It's just not needed. 11 children killed. Just not needed. This is the New York Times. They did an article about it. And there's just one more clip. Just disgusting. The arrogance of, like, you've lost a war of 20 years and you're finally leaving, giving up. And you could just leave. They left, obviously, the terrible way, and I have questions about that, and the way it happens, all very strange. But they finally leave. I'm sure, the relations are eventually going to, sort themselves over because the US is so big, a superpower. And they just do one more thing just to piss everyone off. You got to wonder. It's just crazy. But this is the New York Times.
This is Mohammed Ilyas. He lived in eastern Afghanistan. He was 8 years old when an airstrike killed him inside his home last fall. His 6 brothers and sisters were killed too. So were their mother, Amina, and 4 young cousins. 12 dead in total. An entire immediate family gone. Except for one person. The husband and father, 39-year-old Masih Mubarez.
افغانستان دی په افغانستان کې هر ورځ دغه کیسې دي تکراري په ښارو کې هم دغه حال دی په اطرافو کې هم دغه حال دی فقط وژل دي فقط مړه شول ختم شول نور څوک نفسي ګرځي.
It's a familiar story for civilians caught up in the 18-year war. Mubarez has searched in vain for answers about his family's deaths. He went public with his plight. A UN statement pointed toward American responsibility. But the answers never came. Along with the Bureau of Investigative Journalism, we investigated the airstrike. We wanted to find out who is behind the attack and how complicated it would be to get answers. Our own analysis of the airstrike's aftermath led us to the US military. The US denied the strike, later admitted it. But even today, it still hasn't acknowledged civilians were killed. Mubarez's story shows just how hard it can be to find the truth when your family is killed in Afghanistan. Here's how it unfolded.
So I think I made a mistake here. This isn't actually the one when they was leaving. It's a different thing. Maybe I'll give that a miss. I'll go to it after. This is actually in 2019, a bomb killing 11 children. I'll carry on playing it, but that was my mistake. This is actually in 2019, not when they left. So all those build-up comments are now nonsense, but still worth a watch. And then I'll go to the other one.
The airstrike on the family home happened here, in a remote area southwest of Kabul. Mubarez survived because he was 1,000 miles away in Iran, working illegally. It was the only way he could earn money. Mubarez's wife, Amina, called him on the morning of the airstrike, 7 hours before she would be killed. Already, something was wrong. Their home was in an area mostly controlled by the Taliban. The Afghan military, backed by the US, is fighting to get it back. One Afghan army raid there a few months earlier was captured on camera. Amina told her husband that a raid similar to this had just taken place in their village. She said foreign soldiers were there too, speaking English. That phone call was the last time Mubarez and Amina ever spoke. The raid was part of an operation to free Afghan army soldiers from a Taliban prison. The prison was just 200 yards from Mubarez's house. This is the home before it was destroyed. Here are the living quarters. The family was in there when the bomb struck, the morning after the raid. Photos we obtained show fragments of the weapon that was used. The twisted metal holds several clues, including a square pattern of 4 bolts on a tail fin. Weapons experts said this construction is only used in one type of aerial weapon, a JDAM. JDAMs are devices with fins that fit onto the backs of bombs to steer them and make them more accurate. We then traced an ID number on another piece of debris to a US-based company that manufactures parts for guided weapons. So we knew the weapon, but we still needed to figure out who launched it. There are just two forces conducting airstrikes in Afghanistan: the Afghan government and the United States. But only US warplanes are capable of carrying JDAMs. 2 weeks after the airstrike, the US military said it could find no connection between an American operation and the deaths of Mubarez's family. 5 months after the airstrike, the US denied that any strike ever took place in the area of Mubarez's home. But that's not the story Mubarez tells.
فقط دی آباد کرد اولادم تخریب شوی کرد راولم اولادونم میتخار ولام دی قبرستان که پراتو کور میاد لوتی لوتو دادی ما سرگذشت.
When we recently gave the US military the precise coordinates of the Mubarez home, their story changed. They now admit to striking it. They say it was done in self-defense because of sniper fire coming from the house. Taliban fighters often use civilians as shields against American airstrikes. But the US military denies that any civilians were killed in the airstrike. We spoke to a medical analyst who concluded that the family's corpses show injuries consistent with the effects of an explosive blast. That leaves Mubarez still with lots of questions, but with no one to take responsibility for killing his family.
کچیر چانس هم پیدا کنید افغانستان شرایط هیله بخون که نیدی خب بیام امید باید ولو روی کلویش هیله و نلاری نظام دی پر تابوت تیار که
There you have it. So sorry, that my mistake. That was from 2019. I mean, it's good that New York Times actually did a proper investigation and they, even visualize it, which is great. But that was still some of the stuff I was talking about that almost foreshadows that of all his belongings gone. And the fact that the US obviously denied it was in that area, and then they give them the coordinates and they say it is, but then they still say there's no civilian deaths. Like, just ridiculous. Stop playing these silly games. Obviously, it was the US who bombed that. Who else would it be? Who else would it be? But again, just 11 children killed, his whole family, his whole life, all gone. His house, as you saw, was just in ruins. This is just page on Wikipedia, just all these different list of civilian casualties in the war in Afghanistan in 2011. It's loads there, loads and loads, loads. And then this is for, the whole war. Just loads and loads and loads. And they got even a chart at the start of ones that were, the US-led coalition or the insurgents, and and they just got loads of stuff there. I'm just going to quickly get up the thing. I don't think I'll play the clip. Not really needed. It's everywhere. You just type in US, Afghan, airstrike, kills, and it's just everywhere from 2022. Oh, this is going to be a Zawahiri. ISIS K. Oh, is it seriously going to play this? Where though? Yeah. Pentagon admits killing 10 civilians, including up to 7 children, in Kabul drone strike last month. So this is, I think they might have already left, and then they did it. And they say sorry again. The Pentagon admitted Friday that US drone strike in Kabul, Afghanistan, last month killed as many as 10 civilians, up to 7 children. And he says, as a combatant commander, I'm fully responsible for this, and it's a tragic outcome. Again, sorry, this is all for this ISIS-K. That was the whole build-up before that. It was a shame we got that the wrong way round. And I think, they changed their story. At first, they said they did get the ISIS-K people. Turns out they didn't. It's just what a way to finish it off in the minds of everyone else who, they already thought grimly of you, and that was a perfect, you handed them a win of everything they've said over the years. It's obviously completely true. That's just indefensible. Just leave. You've meddled for 20 years. Let the government sort it out, or their allies. who they're willing to work with to get rid of it. But I'm going to leave it there. I'll put the links in the description. But I know that went on a bit longer than I planned. But thank you for listening to the Truth Over Comfort show, and we'll see you soon. Maybe some Afghanistan stuff, maybe not. Yeah, see you soon.